गुड इवनिंग एंड वेलकम टू गना शॉट। गना शॉट में आप सबका स्वागत है। टुडे वी आर गोना टॉक ऑफ द लामा हु वरीज द गामा, एंड वी ऑल नो what we are talking of. We all know why we are talking of it. But there are interesting issues to this. Just think, the Chinese Communist Party, the Chinese system, such a strong system, is not worried about nuclear missiles. It's not worried about trade, war, everything it is facing. But virtually, it's worried about a frail 90-year-old man who has to be assisted to even speak. That's the power of the Dalai Lama. That's the power of an individual who has internal strength. This is not the first time that the Chinese Communist Party has shaken to its boots by a powerful person. Remember Nancy Pelosi? She was also a frail 80-plus lady. Everyone said, don't go to Taiwan. She said, like hell, I'm going to go to Taiwan. And she landed in Taiwan. And it put China in such a bad light. That was the time 3 years back when the first lot of firing took place, and those punishment drills and all, which have meant nothing. That old lady single-handedly showed China to be what it was, a deflated balloon. And this man is now showing that. The very interesting thing here is that the power of the Dalai Lama will now be felt. So far, the Chinese could sideline him, do whatever he wanted. I mean, he was alive. He was in India. He didn't have influence over Tibet. People forgot about him, everything. But now he's come alive. And this spells danger for Tibet, danger for the CCP. It spells big trouble for the CCP. And most importantly, it spells big trouble because he's outside Tibet. He can't be controlled. Right? And that is why today this analysis is important. We'll take up issue by issue, and if there's anything which I have missed out, we'll answer it through our question answer session. Right. Okay. The first things first. Yeah. We have to understand, this is something which a Tibetan told me. तिब्बत के आजादी में भारत का सुरक्षा है. So correct. And I keep showing it whenever I talk of Tibet or anything, I show this thing. तिब्बत के आजादी में भारत का सुरक्षा है. So we can never diverse whatever is going to happen in Tibet from our security. And this is something which has happened through centuries. Okay. Till it was altered in the last century by Mr. Mao Zedong. Right. Having go into that. Look, we have to be cognizant of one fact. This is a map, this is an American map of just the beginning of the last century. Right. Somewhere around 1910 or something like that. It very clearly, the core of China is only this. This is the only part of China. The rest is not China. Right? And this was called IndoChina. Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, all that belt was called IndoChina. Why it was called IndoChina? This is Indo, this is China, so in between is IndoChina. That's how it was known. Okay? Where people were neither Indian nor Chinese. That's the historical way of looking at it, because there are a lot of, in that area, a lot of Hindu temples and Hindu kingdoms flourished in Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, even up to Vientiane. That's why it's called the IndoChina belt. And of course, China was only this much. Tibet was nowhere part of China. And this is acknowledged by the centuries of great walls which were constructed. There's no one single great wall. Okay. Every dynasty, to protect itself from the northern hordes, Mongolian hordes, constructed a wall as per the extent of the dynasty. And if you say that sum total of these walls, which are these lines which I've shown through various points of time, they actually depict the outer perimeter of China. Tibet was never within the Chinese dynasty ever. No Chinese dynasty considered Tibet as integral to it. This usurpation happened with Mao. Even Chiang Kai-shek didn't usurp Tibet. He usurped Xinjiang, East Turkestan, but he didn't usurp Tibet. It was only Mao who's done it. So the question which we have to ask ourselves is that there are two things happening in this whole construct simultaneously. One is the Dalai Lama's reincarnation. Two is the Chinese system is going in for a problem. I mean, let's not have doubts. Anyone can talk what they want, but in the next 5 years, China will be a far different nation than what it is today. So, is there a confluence happening? Is to be seen, and we have to be ready for it. But that's a later day story. We'll now get to what the Dalai Lama mentioned about his reincarnation, or whoever is to be the next Dalai Lama. And we'll take it forward. What I'm going to do now is actually I'm going to read the Dalai Lama statement, because that's a source document and the source which is important for us to understand. Right? Unless you understand that, you will not get a hang of the rest. So what he says is, on 24th September 2011, I made a statement regarding whether the institution of Dalai Lama should continue. He, at that point of time, he did say, should it continue? Okay. Right. I stated as far as back as 1969, I made clear that the concerned people should decide whether the Dalai Lama's reincarnation should continue in the future. So his own doubts he expressed in 2011, but way back in 1969, he said, look, the people should decide whether the Dalai Lama should continue or not. Okay. Which is very important. So he is bowed not to his own thing or to anyone, not to his own requirement or not to a set of people, but wide range of people. And he says, I also said that when I'm about 90, I will consult the high lamas of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, the Tibetan public, and other concerned people who follow Tibetan Buddhism to reevaluate whether or not the institution of Dalai Lama should continue. Okay. All day. Right. Then he says, I've had no public discussion on this issue. But over the last 14 years, right, that is from 2011 to 2025, leaders of Tibet spiritual traditions, members of Tibetan Parliament in exile, participants in a special general body meeting, members of the Central Tibetan Administration, NGOs, Buddhists from the Himalayan region, okay, Mongolia, Buddhist republics of the Russian Federation, and Buddhists in Asia, including mainland China, have written to me with reasons, earnestly requesting that the institution of the Dalai Lama should continue. So they want a Dalai Lama. The Buddhists want a Dalai Lama. They don't want it to go away. And then, very importantly, he says, in particular, I have received messages through various channels from Tibetans in Tibet making the same appeal. This is a very important factor. In accordance with all these requests, I'm affirming the institution of Dalai Lama shall continue. It's a very, very important thing. So lot of this request has come from people in Tibet. Okay. He's shown complete democracy. Right. Then he says, look, the process by which a future Dalai Lama is to be recognized has been clearly established in the 24th September 2011 statement. And he says, as per that, he said it should be the Tibetan Buddhist traditions, reliable oath-bound Dharma protectors who are linked inseparably to responsibility for doing so will rest exclusively the members of the Garden Phodrang Trust, the office of His Holiness Dalai Lama. They should consult the lineage of the Dalai Lamas. They should accordingly carry out the procedure of search and recognition in accordance with the past tradition. So he is given out a method. I hereby reiterate that the Garden Phodrang Trust has sole authority to recognize the future reincarnation. No one else has any such authority to interfere in this matter. Period. Okay? By saying so, he has said that the Chinese don't have any authority in this matter. Because it's only the Chinese who have this interest to interfere. Others are not interested in interfering. Others are interested in supporting him. Okay. So, this is a very, very powerful statement. Right? So, important things. People in Tibet want the Dalai Lama. It doesn't matter whether he's in Tibet or in India. They want him. Right? And Chinese don't have the leeway. Right. So this is the interesting thing which has come up. So if those of you who are watching Gunner Shot for the first time, do subscribe to this video or to Gunner Shot and also like the channel. Like Yogesh regularly says, please click the like button, subscribe to the YouTube channel and turn on all notifications and become member and share videos. Right. So that's how it is. Okay. But there are issues. The Dalai Lama has not passed away, he's still there. His reincarnation as to who will become his successor only will start when he dies. And then it takes several years to search out who's the successor. Even his succession to the throne of Dalai Lama or to the seat of the Dalai Lama, when he was a young boy and he was brought from somewhere near Amdo, which is almost bordering China, right? At the age of 7 or 8, I don't remember that exact date, but the search took more than 3 years. Okay. They have the Buddhist leaders who are there or who have been nominated will go through a process, and that process is known only to them. They look at mystical visions, clues left by the previous Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama now would have left clues to all these people. Then they go and search wherever those boys are who fit that bill. And then they go through a process. And then that boy is brought, used to be brought those days to Lhasa, kept in the Potala, trained until the time he became wise enough to be a Dalai Lama and exercise his temporal powers. The body around him would exercise it. So it's a huge tradition. And it was a boy who was always picked. Okay. Now, the Chinese are Chinese. They know this problem. They know it. They know all this nonsense which I'm talking. So they've already this uh, you know article came out long back that China has a natural say in choosing the next Dalai Lama. Why? Xi Jinping and company have been Sinicizing Buddhism. They want Buddhism to be as per communist principles. How can it be? But well, that's communism, right? And today, if you go into South China Morning Post or any Chinese thing, all this will come. Why China wants the next Dalai Lama as per their choice, and why is it so sensitive to them? Okay, I mean, very simple. Can they afford? Look at it from the Chinese viewpoint. Can they afford to have a Dalai Lama who's sitting outside Tibet, and that too in India? For all these years, one of the problems which China has always had is the Dalai Lama sitting in India. And it's a government in exile. Remember, it's a government in exile. It's not just a monastery. There are political implications about this. But then events have flown in such a manner, we'll talk of it. Uh, it didn't happen that way. What does the Chinese government plan to do? What is China's plan for this succession? That's interesting. What they do is they choose something called a golden urn. They have a golden urn system. Now, this golden urn must be there in Potala. I don't know where it is. Right? It's a relic of Tibet. I believe it was used by the Manchus once upon a time uh, to anoint Tibetan lamas so that the succession is controlled by the Manchus. They might have done it once or odd time. Okay. And what they used to do is they modified this story. What Dalai Lama is now doing, or that's a tradition. They used to say, okay, the guys whom you want to nominate, you search, put their names in one urn, and there'll be a lottery who we'll pick out whom we want to pick out. That's what the Monchis used to do. The final say, as per this golden urn system, is with the Manchus. So China wants to do that now. They will pick up 4 or 5 chaps, put their names in the urn, and they will take out the name whom they want. Ultimately, it has to be a China bag thing. Now, China knew this beforehand. I mean, it is not as if this is a new thing. Way back in 2007, they incorporated this golden urn system into their official regulations to deal with Buddhism and Dalai Lama succession. Okay. Because why 2007? 2008 was the Beijing Olympics. At that point of time, they would have had some idea of how to knock off Dalai Lama and all that. And those days in 2007, 2008, Tibet was on fire. Even to the extent Deng Xiaoping went and spoke to people in Tibet and said, let's come to some, common ground. At some point of time, he also was interested in giving some degree of autonomy. The Tibetans were ruthlessly, subverted, even killed and suppressed just before the Beijing Olympics. They objected to this, Olympic flame reaching Beijing. And they used to carry out a lot of demonstrations all over the world. It is us, all of us, including India, who didn't help Tibetans at that time. Because America and the West wanted Beijing Olympics to succeed. It was a coming out party for China. So they suppressed and threw the support for Buddhism away. And hence Tibetans lost their legs. After that, it's gone. Okay. So anyway, we'll come back to these twists and turns in the history to understand what lies ahead. So this ceremony is now law, this golden horn ceremony as per Chinese law. Now they say that the current Dalai Lama was used by a different method which was never used, which is wrong. Okay, because there was turmoil inside China. Since turmoil was there in China, the people did something else. This comes back to that thing which I always keep saying. When there's turmoil in China, when the central authority in China becomes weak, Tibet becomes strong. It can do what it wants. But that's an aside, but that's not happened everywhere. Now, the Chinese feel that reincarnation of Dalai Lama will lead to social unrest in China's Tibetan areas. If there is social unrest in Tibetan areas, mind you, Tibetan areas are just not Tibet. Tibetan areas flow into Yunnan, flow into Amdo in the north. They flow into Xinjiang. So if those areas are also affected, a large part of China can get affected. That's the risk Chinese run. Now this puts them in a huge problem. Because on one hand, the Dalai Lama has very clearly said the Chinese have nothing to do with my succession. And on the other hand, he has said, I've got this feedback from Tibet that they want the Dalai Lama to continue. So if the Chinese impose a separate Dalai Lama in Tibet, his acceptability might not be a problem. And they might consider the Dalai Lama who's chosen from outside Tibet is the real Dalai Lama, in which case the Tibetan problem resurfaces. This is on the cards, the way I look at it. Okay. And considering the fact, today morning only I spoke about Xi Jinping, his health, Wang Yang, and military, and a lot of problems which are involved, demographic problem, all that. So, will Tibet be controlled by China? Or will Tibet slip out of control of China? Is the issue which we have to consider. And China feels it already has a blueprint. You see, when the Panchen Lama was to be incorporated, right? When he died in 1989, okay, the old Panchen Lama, when he died, a new Panchen Lama had to be nominated. The Panchen Lama is nominated by Dalai Lama. So the Dalai Lama nominated a 5-year-old boy as his successor. And this boy was kidnapped and taken away. He's not nowhere. He must be dead by now. They brought someone else in. And that someone else in is the guy now brought in as Panchen Lama. And this Panchen Lama has met Xi Jinping 1 month back. And he says, I will pledge he's already pledged his allegiance to the Communist Party. So the match fixing going on. The only problem is, in the old model, Dalai Lama nominated a Panchen Lama who was within Tibet, who could be lifted and finished off. And the new guy who's there now for about 40 or 35 years, is beholden to the Chinese Communist Party. His allegiance is to the Chinese Communist Party. So he will say whatever. But he doesn't have the authority to nominate a Dalai Lama. So here comes a catch-22 situation. What if Dalai Lama nominates someone from outside China as the next Dalai Lama? Then That fellow will be the Dalai Lama, who will be in Dharamsala as part of the Central Tibetan Authority, and he'll wield the temporal power outside. There'll be a fair lot of people from Tibet who will owe allegiance to him. There'll be a fair lot of people who will owe allegiance to the new Dalai Lama, whoever China, nominates, and there'll be a kid pit, and this will lead eventually to social unrest, or rather, the likelihood is high, as and when the central authority in China goes down. That's the problem which China will face today. And a China which is weakening, which is not economically strong, not militarily strong, politically there's an issue. It's not a survival issue for Xi Jinping, but he doesn't have the same authority which he had once. Okay. So there are issues in this. Geopolitically, they don't have that much weight as they had probably 3-4 years back. Now, Kiran Rijiju, our minister, who's a Buddhist, he very clearly said, no one has the right to interfere or decide who the successor of His Holiness the Dalai Lama will be. Okay. Only he or his institution has the authority to make that decision. His followers believe that deeply. He's a follower. It's important for disciples across the world that he decides his succession. So he's already put a thing, spoke. And Indian government has supported him. Indian government has said, we have seen reports relating to the statement made by His Holiness the Dalai Lama about the contribution of the Dalai Lama institution. Government of India does not take any position or speak on matters concerning beliefs and practices of faith and religion. Government has always upheld the freedom of religion for all in India and will continue to do so. So anyone can choose his Dalai Lama. We are not going to interfere. We will not support China's stance on this. Okay. So now, China has a problem now with the Dalai Lama. He's alive. He's named the incarnation story. They want to incarnate. They cannot start because till he dies. After he dies, it's going to take time. So that gap will be there. Till then, if there is overt interference from China, there is a good feasibility that people will rise. And that's because, I've said it's a circle. Right. Now China has told us, stop doing this. It's come out. Right. What have they said? China has urged India to stop using Tibet issues to interfere in their domestic affairs. And they've again spelled out how Beijing wants to that is, China wants to nominate the next Dalai Lama, which we have not agreed to. We have said people are free to do what they want officially, but Kiran Rijiju, a senior minister of the Modi government, has said, look, we don't agree to it. He's a Buddhist. So the Modi government or our government has created an opening. And they sense it. I think it's a damn good move from my side. Right? So the Chinese foreign ministry made the call on Friday, a day after a senior Indian minister said only the Dalai Lama and the trust he set up has the authority to identify his successor. Okay. Now they say this comment by Kiran Rijiju is in opposition to China's long-held position that the succession should be in line with the tradition and Chinese law. So this law, like I said, from 2007 they've incorporated. So that is their long-held law. We don't have to recognize it because that's internal to China. Okay. But as far as Tibetan Buddhism is concerned, the Buddhism is Tibetan, but it's not in Tibet. It's all over the world. Today, Tibetans are found in India, found in USA, found in Norway, found in Sweden, everywhere. They're found in even Japan. They're found everywhere. So, right. Then they've said we hope India can fully recognize the high sensitivity of issues related to Tibet and clearly see the anti-India and separatist nature of 14th Dalai Lama. China has already always called him a terrorist, in fact, right, and insurgent and all that. Well, that is China's way of looking at it because now it's worried. So the last line in this is important. India should honor its commitment. So why should India honor its commitment? That's the first question. India should honor its commitments on Tibet-related matters, exercise caution in word and deed, stop using Tibet-related issues to interfere in China's internal affairs, and avoid undermining the improvement and development of China-India relations. So the first hint of a threat is coming out. Okay, what is this business of we having recognized Tibet? I keep quoting this. What is it presaged on? It is presaged on this 2003 agreement. That is when we recognize Tibet as part of China. If tomorrow you go back on this agreement, you have full right to do what you want with Tibet. And I think it's time. There's the time to do it. And I'll explain to you why. Yesterday, in Sanjay Dikshit's Jaipur dialogue also, I spoke of this. But I spoke of it in the larger context, but now I'm focusing only on this issue. What does the 2003 agreement read? It says the Indian side agrees to designate Changu of Sikkim state as the venue for border trade market. And the Chinese side agrees to designate Renkingang of Tibet Autonomous Region as the venue for border trade market. Changu is this side of Natula, Renkingang is that side of Natula. They say this will be the venue for border trade market, which means that the India-Tibet border or India-China border rests on Natula. That's the implicit agreement in this. The implicit agreement is that side is China, that is Tibet is then recognized as China. This side Sikkim is recognized as part of India. That's the agreement of 2003. So they are invoking this agreement now. Now, what is the validity of this agreement? I mean, there's a question which we have to ask, which I've been asking for the past 5 years. Our complete dealings, everything with the government of China or the People's Republic of China is based on a set of border peace and tranquility MOUs which we've got into them. Based on this 2003 agreement, all the agreements, border peace and BPTAs, the border peace and tranquility agreements are based on this. That side is Tibet, this side is, or that side is China, this side is India. But that, all the agreements which have been signed from 2003 till 2020 stand null and void after the violation of all those agreements in 2020 when they incursed into Galwan. When they wanted to force a solution on Galwan, based on Galwan and that 1959 line and all that, that whole story is vanished. If that entire story is vanished and the whole logic of why all those agreements have been violated, why should we not violate this agreement? Or say, look, this agreement stands suspended. Like we did with the Indus Water Treaty. Sorry, ये खत्म हो गया, नया शुरू करेंगे. We'll start new. You just suspend it or hold it in abeyance. The moment you do that, you de-recognize Tibet as part of China. The moment you de-recognize Tibet as part of China, you have a say in the Dalai Lama process. The moment that happens, the political identity and status of Tibet changes. And people in Tibet will get a new story. The whole thing will change. Now, till last month, all these were part of the story. No one bothered. No one. Now that Dalai Lama has put out his mind, all these factors come into play. And it is up to us in India and the government, it should have the political capability to stand up. There are issues. It's not as if you can just stand up and scrap this agreement. For that, you have to build up strength. We'll come to that. Now, today, not today, 2 days back, I think day before yesterday, New York Times also has done two analysis on this whole story. They also caught up. It's not only New York Times. I've shown New York Times because this is American, you know, media. American media has also started doing this, and because this has geopolitical ramifications, right? Now, the points they make already is this: there is a major consensus in the diaspora that the next Dalai Lama will be from outside China. So people from outside Tibet want Dalai Lama from outside. And at some point of time, the Dalai Lama himself has said that the next Dalai Lama will be born in a free country, not in Tibet. I mean, he's not said not in Tibet. He said if Tibet is free, Tibet it can be then from Tibet. But otherwise, he should be from a free country. Right now, Tibet is not free, so he can't be from Tibet. Already, he's put a clue. So virtually, the next Dalai Lama is going to be from outside Tibet. The trust dealing with the succession has no reach in Tibet at this point of time. But should they want to do it through whatever means they have, that means you're opening up channels into Tibet. Now, those spiritual channels or religious channels can be used for political purposes also. Now, it's not as if in China everyone opposes this. There are a lot of moderates in China. They must be thinking, yeah, if all this problem is happening with Xi Jinping or aging, purging and all that going on, why should we have a headache with Tibetans? That will take us, back to Stone Ages. So many people in China think that is there a way to come to a compromise with Dalai Lama before he dies? Because once he dies and he leaves his will, and the Tibetan authority and the elders who are part of the Garden Forbrang Trust start acting as per his wishes, then the matter is out of the Chinese hands. So the Chinese are also operating in a time frame. And that time frame one doesn't know. It could be tomorrow, it could be 1 year, it could be 10 years. Who knows? I wish the Dalai Lama, he lives beyond the century. I mean, that's my way. But till then, whole story is going to go up and down. It's not going to die. This will be a live story. There will be a live problem which China has to deal with. In this, what are our interests? Our interest is very simple. We want Tibet to be a free country, and it should be a buffer between India and China. I'm very clear. This is my way of looking at it. India's interest is Tibet should be a free country. We have made a mistake in the past. The way we've handled Tibet should not mean that we should not repeat that. I mean, does not mean that we repeat that same mistake in future. What about Tibet? Tibet is the thing because their temporal authority has been sitting in Dharmashala, and otherwise the 9 million Tibetans are there in that huge landmass. Okay. What do they want? They want independence. They want autonomy. What do they want? What do they want? Will they agree to the middle path of peaceful resolution as said by Dalai Lama? What is that middle path? That it will be autonomous within China. Will people agree once Dalai Lama passes away? There is a lot of interaction which I've done with Tibetans, they feel, look, things will change after Dalai Lama passes away. The political people who will emerge after the Dalai Lama passes away. See, the point is this: the Dalai Lama will pass away. A new Dalai Lama will take 2-3 years to come. And for another 5 to 6 years or 10 years, till he becomes big and he can assume the responsibility of Dalai Lama, there'll be this trust which will run the whole show. Will this trust really follow what Dalai Lama said and go to the middle path? Or go along with the middle path, or they'll change another path? If that happens, there's a problem for China. This is not a new thing. It might last a decade, it might last 2 years, a decade, 20 years. I don't know. So it puts an open-ended thing. And of course, Tibet wants Dalai Lama as per Tibetan wishes, not Chinese wishes. That's very clear by now. Because what Dalai Lama said, I've taken feedback from within Tibet. Because Chinese interests are very clear. They want Tibet to be part of China, inalienable part of China. Because it gives a great communication link to Xinjiang, that is Xinjiang and Tibet and Xinjiang give connectivity to each other at the head. If one is lost, the other will go. That's the problem with China. Okay. Tibet is critical for minerals. Tibet is critical for water. Tibet is critical for energy security. Xi Jinping and company want to put solar panels there and other things. Okay, so where does all this go? Whenever the Chinese, like I keep saying, whenever the Chinese central power was high, right, the Tibetan flag was, down. Central power high, China's power in Beijing or wherever the headquarters was high, Tibetan story was down, and Tibet was under the Chinese flag. But whenever the central power went down, the Tibetan independence came up. That's their history. You have to see facts. So today, the Chinese central power is going down. My view is that in 5, 6, 7 years, the power will wane further. It will not go back up. If there is a forcible thing, China might they'll go into a revolution, like what happened then. If that happens, then the whole story is something different. So we are in a nebulous kind of a situation. That's what I want to say. And that nebulousness has started now. And this nebulousness will not go. And this nebulousness which has come will have second order effects, for which I don't know what will happen. Yeah, that's what I said. Their political, military, and economic power is weakening. Decline of Chinese power is imminent. That's what I've been saying. I still stand by it. Will it result in Tibet gaining independence? Well, the opportunity exists if you do it now. And this opportunity has to be conflated with the Dalai Lama's succession. But all this can start only when the present Dalai Lama passes away. There is time for it. But confusion shuru ho gaya isme. What is the way forward? The way forward will be actually determined by what people of Tibet want. That's what the Dalai Lama has said. The people of Tibet have to speak from within. But the problem for the people of Tibet to speak from within is that communists have infiltrated the Tibetan system quite a bit. Quite a bit. Okay. And that is compromised. How do you get out of that? That's the thing. Right? And there are 4 parties in this whole story. See, it's not a matter of just incarnation. The Tibetan question will come up. It is Tibet, India, and USA, and the PRC. Now, USA is the joker in this pack. Yet Trump manega. What will Trump's stance be? Or will it be beyond Trump after 3 years, or 4 years? So we don't know. So Uncertainty creates its own issues when it started. We should be alive to that. The way I look at it, we need all three have to get together, put pressure on PRC. Okay, forget Trump. But there's a huge lobby in China who wants to support Tibet. Let's get that lobby up. That's the point. PRC will never negotiate. Let's be very clear. They will not negotiate on anything. Even if it negotiate, we can't trust it. A lot of people say, what about Taiwan? Look, you have to understand in 1912, Chiang Kai-shek, the national government declared Tibet as part of China. That declaration is part of Taiwan's constitution. So this problem will continue irrespective of which government is there in China. It's a matter of whether they have the political power to handle Tibet is an issue. So even if the CCP goes, the claim on Tibet by any political party will not change. So we are looking at a long-term knotty problem. And people say, will this border between India and Tibet be normalized? It will never be normalized because of Tibet. Look, 1914 in the Simla Convention, there was a chance. Why? The Simla Convention was, interestingly, people don't know, was to demarcate the border between Tibet and China, the northern border, not even the eastern border, not the Yunnan border, farther, Amdo border. Okay. It was not about the India-Tibet border. That was deemed to be settled by them. The chap who represented China, the Imperial China, a chap called Ivan Chen, he agreed to this and overnight ran away without signing. That's a different story because he didn't want the other border, not this border. It's recorded. Okay. But since CCP has come, all this border is now under trouble. So this border will never get resolved till such time the Tibet question doesn't get resolved. The Tibet question has got reopened now with the Dalai Lama's in reincarnation, whole story. Right? It will smolder. This will smolder. This is not going to happen in a hurry. Right? This is going to happen. Because why? China has solidified its hold on Tibet. There's military infrastructure, upgradation of LAC. Tibetans have been controlled. Tibetan Buddhism has been Sinicized. A lot of Tibetans are in concentration camps. And people running away from Tibet have also reduced. The ground situation has changed. But this is the thing. If you think that under normal circumstances, that people in Tibet will rise against China, then we are mistaken. This is something which I said earlier also. But this will change after the reincarnation. And that's what I've said. This might change after reincarnation. Why? Everyone feels religion is dear to them. I've always argued there are three shades of Tibetans. One, who are not reconciled to the Chinese occupation. The second, who are happy with the Chinese occupation. They've collaborated with China. And there's a majority who want to get on with life. But this majority also want Dalai Lama. They believe in the Dalai Lama. And if the Dalai Lama is in India, they look to India. And if they're being, so far the Dalai Lama was here, everyone knew he was here and there was no fight about it. So they said, okay, Dalai Lama is there, let him be there, let him continue. But now there's a Dalai Lama which is being imposed on them. So the majority who want to get on with life normally will get instigated by their own religion and their own views. And that's going to be very, very messy for China. Though the communists have made deep inroads into Tibetan society. Now, pull back from here will be a long haul. This pullback will be a long haul for India, for Tibetans and the Dalai Lama succession thing, as also for China. As also for China. Okay. So all these issues have now come forth. I do hope and pray that His Holiness the Dalai Lama lives forever. But well, he's after all a god, he could. We don't know. But what has happened is the Tibetan issue, which was dormant till now, is now caught fire. Is it caught a great fire? No, it's going to smolder. Now, where will this lead to? Will depend on the Chinese and the status of China as days go by. India and its political will to change its own equations and its economic strength and military strength. And also Tibetans who want their Dalai Lama rather than a Chinese Dalai Lama. So all these issues are there. And I thought I'll put them in picture to all of you. Right? I do hope that you people have understood what I've put. It is not a straight line which we're going to negotiate. It's going to be a teda-meda path. So if you liked, please like this channel, subscribe and all that.